Welcome back to my channel, guys. Thank you for joining today's podcast. I've got two amazing guests. My first guest, who's already in the waiting room, waiting to join us, John Stapleton, an authentic entrepreneur. I love the word authentic. He really is quite the inspiration. He's got some amazing stories to share and some insights to share with us today. Of course, you guys, as always, can ask questions. We'll be here to answer them. I'm going to bring John on in a minute. Just before I do, a reminder, we are here to help 1 million people start a business of their own. This year, we've helped 72 people so far. I'm very proud of that number. I know it's not a big number, but we'll get there. What I'm really excited about is how the community that are interested in helping people start businesses of their own is building. You guys, without you, I don't think we can do it. No one can achieve this mission to ensure that all these talented people out there that can't find a job right now can create one for themselves. We can't do it without your help. So thanks so much. I can see so many of the very loyal fans here already. So thanks for joining. I hope you get some insight today. If you want to listen to this week's Good Luck Club podcast, we interviewed the founder of Manice Bank. He's the CEO, fantastic individual, Norris Capel. His story is mind-blowing. He has over 2.5 million daily users of his bank, and he now owns his own bank. He created it from his mind to reality based on a problem that he had. His immigrant story is absolutely fantastic. I think you guys will be inspired and maybe even want to go and start your own bank when you hear what he's achieved. So everyone told him it wasn't possible to start a bank, and he proved them wrong, and now he's a challenger bank. A lot of the big institutional banks are very worried about what he's doing because he's focusing on you, the customer. And I think you will find his story absolutely fascinating. So go listen to that, goodluckpod.com. Of course, you can also get the links throughout my channels as well. We have a couple of really interesting things coming up. We're going to be trying a Discord event. So you guys that probably know what that technology is, we'll be trying a Discord event on Thursday. So tomorrow, hope you guys can join that too. And of course, we have our 12 days of Christmas insights. So every single day throughout December, we have a different insight: how to raise money, how to start a company with no money, how to build a brand, not a business, all of these sorts of things, all free right here on this channel. So let's get to the main event today. Let me bring my first guest on, John, who will introduce himself and tell us a little bit about what he's up to. Hey, John, how you doing?
Simon, delighted to be part of this. Thanks for inviting me on. How are you?
Good. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you here. I was a fan of yours ever since we both joint judged at the Pitch UK event. So big shout out to those guys. But I'm a big fan now, John. So tell my audience that don't know you a little bit about what you're about.
Right. We got 30 minutes, Simon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Listen, I can do it in probably 3 minutes. But basically, I've been involved in food and drink all my life. Yeah. Back in 1987, we set up New Covent Garden Soup Company. Yeah. Basically, soup in a carton. Where are you? Can you see that?
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. So soup in a carton. We were the first ones to make fresh soup, believe it or not, back in 1987. A guy called Andrew Palmer, whose idea it was, and myself got together and thought, basically, we got so many questions with so many answers that we really couldn't figure out. So we thought the only way we could answer these questions is by doing it ourselves. So we set up the business, and I suppose to a certain extent, the rest is history. But we were the first to make fresh soup, put it in a carton, sell on the retailer shelves, 87 to 1998. I had kind of itchy feet at that point. We sold the business in 1998, and I was already thinking about what to do next, which is similar but different, which is basically taking fresh soup in a carton to the US market. So we were going to put fresh soup in a carton again and sell it in the States and do it all out there. And I brought some of the shareholders with me, but really set up a new business out there in the States. Unfortunately, it didn't work. You kind of think that, if anybody knows about fresh soup, I do. But despite all that, it didn't work. And, so I came back from that experience with my sort of tail between my legs, trying to figure out what I want to do next. But I am, by the way, a great believer that, you learn an awful lot more from your failures in life than you do from your successes. And Glencoe Foods, which was our second business, certainly was a failure, certainly in comparison to New Covent Garden. And I set about then basically proving to, I suppose, everybody, but really to myself, that failure wasn't what I was going to go out on. I wanted to do it again. And that's where the third business idea came from, which is, again, based in the UK, although I now live in Germany since I came back from the States. So I've been here quite a bit. I'm in Germany today. A company called Little Dish. It's all about healthy, convenient, tasty meals for kids, young kids, not babies, but toddlers. And we also added a range of snacks later as well. I sold the business in 2017 to a US private equity firm. And since then, I've been kind of, fingers and lots of pies, mostly in the food industry. So I'm in food and drink is what I do. I mentor upcoming entrepreneurs in the food and drink space. I advise businesses in early stage and also further along up to exit. And I invest in some businesses too. So very quickly, there's a couple here that I just got examples of. Your Nixon Kicks is one. It's a range of it's a really cool, refreshing adult soft drink below the sugar threshold. So no sugar of any quantity in there at all. Tastes great. Had a relaunch just recently, rebrand. There's a business called Capsicana, which is a range of Latin American sauces and other flavor products. Challenger brands is what I do most, really. And one I've invested in recently, a company called Insane Grain. I'd love to talk to you about that as well a bit later on, because that has purpose written all over it. And I love to get involved in businesses that are all about purpose, as you do. So, yeah, lots to talk about, but maybe we'll just take it in bite-sized chunks, eh?
Amazing. And, I haven't had lunch. So when you're showing all those snacks, I wish people would invent a TV screen where I could just reach in and just eat those things. So awesome. I'm always interested in people's stories. Were you always entrepreneurial? Did it naturally come to you, or did you train yourself? Were your parents entrepreneurs? How did it play out?
That's a really interesting question, and I get at this sometimes. And the best answer, the short answer is, I grew up on a farm in the west of Ireland. There's two sort of answers really, but I grew up on a farm in the west of Ireland, and nothing unusual about that, right? But basically, when you grow up on a farm, you're surrounded by food. You do know where food comes from, because it's the cows in the field, frankly, and it's the milk and it's the grain, and it's it's just like food is all around you. So I was very much aware of food. And then secondly, I took up track and field when I went to university, or when I went to school and university. So I did a lot of track and field. So I was very interested way back then, before it was any way kind of fashionable at all, to understand the relationship between food and diet and elite athletes' performance. I was thinking about these sort of things way back then. And I kind of thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could combine my hobby with some sort of a career? That would be the best ever. But Ireland in the 80s was all about, there wasn't much going on. It was a deep recession. So I was kind of thinking I had to be practical and figure out, what would pay the bills and what would be a career. But guess what? Food and drink is the basic, it's one of the basics, right? Everybody is going to have to eat and drink, right, into the future. To a certain extent, and I don't like saying this, but food and drink has become a bit of a, pandemic resistant industry, right? It's done quite well because we all have to eat and drink. So, that wasn't going to be a fad. I wasn't going to go out of fashion. So I felt pretty confident doing that. But as regards being an entrepreneur, I couldn't spell the word entrepreneur, really. I came out of university, met Andrew, like I said, and he was the archetypal entrepreneur. I learned a huge amount from him. But, I think what I'd say in hindsight is that actually growing up on a farm prepares you quite well. I don't think maybe, people think of farmers as entrepreneurs necessarily, but they do, they have a very action focus on life, very down to earth. A lot of things happen to them that's outside of their control, like bad harvests happen and stuff comes from left to right without them knowing it. And that's kind of like the world that we live in as entrepreneurs, as business leaders. Things happen all the time. So I think even from the age of 6 to 12 to 15, I was experiencing stuff that was very kind of second nature to me, that really stood me in good stead for business life later as an entrepreneur. Now, that's without a huge amount of hindsight, okay? But I certainly can recognize that. So that's how I'd answer that question, Simon.
It's a good point about food. I mean, it doesn't matter. We all need food. I guess a lot of the time, I think people who have ideas around food, and a lot of my listeners have ideas, and a lot of the time they're around food products. It feels like a very daunting industry to get into, though, even though everyone needs to eat. I guess that's why there's a lot of products out there that supply that solution. Is there anything you look for in particular when it comes to, you mentioned purpose there, which is awesome, but is there anything in particular you look for within a product? Is it the people behind the product, or is it the product? Is it both, or is it something else?
Yeah. It'll take me a while to figure this out, actually, like most things in life, to be honest. But I'm pretty sure I have the answer pretty down now, because I do a lot of investing myself, and I'm part of Mission Ventures, by the way, which is kind of a I suppose formalized version of what I do myself in terms of getting involved in early stage food and drink, particularly early stage ventures, and figuring out who you put your money behind or who you put your effort behind, because we're an accelerator, really. We help them spend the investment wisely. And it comes down to three things. I've distilled it down to three things anyway. Number one is, and it's kind of sound really obvious, but it's the product. And does the product do what it says on the tin? because in FMCG and in food and drink in particular, we're all about building a brand, right? And that's what I've done. New Covent Garden was a brand, Little Dish was a brand. The businesses I'm involved with right now are all brands, and that's where the value is, and that's the exciting bit of it, really. But the brand makes a promise. Brand, first of all, identifies who your target audience is. Yeah, you have to have a target audience. You have to very much know who you're selling to. If you say you're selling to everybody, you'll end up selling to nobody, right? That's unfortunately what happens. So you got to be very focused on who you're communicating with. But the brand communicates to the consumer, your target audience, what's inside the pack, and that promise that the product's going to really do something for them that they've never experienced before, right? But the product absolutely has to deliver. If you're going to make that promise, you got to be able to deliver it in spades. So the product is key. It's got to really do what you're proposing it does. Yeah, number one. Number two, and you touched on it yourself, is the entrepreneur. It is absolutely the entrepreneur. Sometimes I say the entrepreneur is number one, but you have to have a product. It's so important though that the entrepreneur knows what they're doing, and not that we ever knew what we were doing when we started off, but we knew what we didn't know when we were open to figuring things out. Resilience is a word that's thrown around quite a bit, but it's so important. I mean, entrepreneurs need to grow a thick skin, and they need to get up every time they're knocked down, and you'd be knocked down every single time, every single day almost. And they have to be smart about their resources, and they have to be smart about what they focus on. But ultimately, they have to be coachable as well. And I'm not trying to say I have all the answers. In fact, I definitely don't have all the answers. But if I provide some advice, what I like to get is some feedback to say, okay, we'll do that. Or on the other hand, pushback. Pushback is equally good. In fact, it's probably better. So long as it's pushback with some reasoning behind it and justification. The entrepreneur says, actually, I don't think we should be doing that. We should be doing this instead. And the reason is the following, and it's a good reason. Then I go, you know what? That's a great idea. Let's do some more of that. So the product and the entrepreneur are key, and then ultimately the business has to be scalable. There has to be enough people out there that's going to want to part with their money for this product. And if you're talking about brands, you're typically talking about premium brands. I certainly was in my day, and I like to focus on premium brands today. So if you're talking about introducing this into the market, which is 3 times the price of the can, you need to be able to say, okay, that's a premium product, but will enough people buy it? So you have to have a wide enough audience. Having said it's a target audience that's defined, there has to be enough of them. So product, for all the reasons I mentioned, the entrepreneur or the team, number 2, and number 3, a sustainable business that is, that you can grow into the future, it's scalable. And everything else can be wrong, and you can pretty much put it right. But if those 3 are wrong, or one of those 3 are wrong, you got a problem.
Fascinating. Good lessons there for people to listen to if they're looking to pitch to an investor, what they need to have. I think resilience, as you say, is so important. I think with resilience, you can learn all the things you don't know over time. But if you don't have resilience, you give up too quick and you don't learn everything. So it's such a good point. The other thing I wanted to just pick up on, you said earlier about failure. I mean, it's said a lot, failure, you learn a lot from failure, but no one wants to fail, right? But what were your lessons, so people don't have to go to America and try and launch a soup brand and fail? Maybe just share with them what you learned so that they don't go and do that.
Yeah, it was a pretty extravagant way to figure that out. I agree. I could have figured it out before I went, couldn't I? But I think the juxtaposition of the product is basically, okay, there are lots of differences in the States. Don't get me wrong, right? And listen, the US is littered with failed, successful UK businesses that went to the States and failed. Like Tesco went and failed, and Greencore went and failed, but we went and failed, and in terms of the lessons learned, I mean the biggest lesson learned is to learn from failure, is to allow yourself to learn from failure. I mean, make no mistake, you cannot make a career out of failure, right? That's clearly not a recipe for success by definition. But allowing yourself to fail, I think it brings you huge benefits. There's no question about it. Success is a lousy teacher. People have said that to me so many times, and it's so true, because you don't really always know what's causing the success. You're typically pulling on lots of different levers at the same time. You're never going to a business and saying, "I'm going to try this and see if it works," and if it doesn't work, then I'll try something else. No, you're trying everything that you think is going to contribute to the success. And sometimes you're successful and you're just running to stand still, like with Little Dish. Little Dish also, actually, both businesses. But New Covent Garden in particular, we had a tiger by the tail. So we're trying to keep up with it all the time. We didn't have time to think about what was really successful. We were just doing it. But failures, you're left an awful lot more exposed when failure happens. And especially when the expectation, when I went out there, I brought people together. I brought shareholders together. I went out and spoke to retailers, and they said, look, this is what happened in the UK. We can make the same thing happen here. And I brought people together and built a team. And, all that kind of was, I let them all down. I certainly felt like that when it didn't work. So I think the point about it is, in essence, failure is not a great place to be, but it's a good place to have been, because it makes sure that you never want to be there again. Yeah. A failure hurts like hell. That's the thing about it. That's why nobody wants to go there. But I then eventually, when I figure things out and dusted myself off with the US experience, came back to Europe and decided, the only way I could deal with the failure was to prove that it was a one-off, and that it happens, and not dwell on it, and not, because your mind is, introspection kicks in, and your mind plays all sorts of tricks on you, and it says, were you the reason it failed, or actually was New Covent Garden a success despite you, or all sorts of things you think, and that's not true, but it's just not true. So the only way to prove that to yourself is get back in the saddle and try it again, and I guess that's where the inspiration and the motivation came from, to do it all again and try something that I could prove a success, and luckily, happily, it worked out.
Yes, it's a great formula as well. Like the kind of experienced entrepreneur investing in the next generation of food product entrepreneurs. That's a real good mix, because I know myself. Like, I've done 18 startups. I don't think I necessarily want to do another one, but I love helping other people do it. and so there's something really interesting in that dynamic. There was no obvious thing, like you went to California with hot soup and no one drank hot soup. Was it just a combination of things? There wasn't a particular learning. It was just a combination of things, wasn't it?
It was like all these things. When something big works or doesn't work, it's a combination of factors. Yeah, and I know it. We did a lot right. We flew soup. We made soup in Harlesden in North London in our factory, and flew it on Virgin Airlines. And I'm not kidding you. We flew it on Virgin Airlines out to the States, to both California and to New Jersey. And we had a man in a van driving around selling the soup, to find out what we needed to find out what was different, to find out what worked. To understand the dynamics of the retail trade there, to flavor combinations. It's a bit different to, we call it tomato and basil, and they call it tomato and basil. Well, that's true, but a lot more to it than that. So we want to really understand all that. So we got a lot right, and we also had enough customers to be interested in. The thing is, if you don't have any customers, you have to pack up pretty quickly and go home, don't you? Because you think, oh, well, that was a waste of time. But we had enough customers to keep us excited and keep us interested, and that was the thing that kept us going. We just didn't have enough. And a number of things happened outside of our control, and the shareholder base, and somebody came knocking on our door to buy us so prematurely that we didn't take them seriously, and then we ultimately did, and then we got sucked into the process, and then we lost time, and we could go on. So some things are outside of our control, although we probably could have been smarter about it. Other things we maybe didn't do terribly intelligently. Maybe in hindsight, I wouldn't have built a factory again. Here in the UK in '87, nobody had a fresh soup factory. We were the first ones to put it in a carton. So we didn't have a choice. We had to do it ourselves. We could have outsourced. We could have found somebody to do it, actually. Not many, but was one or two out there. We could have done it that way. But I felt that was my decision. I felt we should keep it in-house and keep it under wraps. It's a barrier to entry for others. Maybe in hindsight, it wasn't such a barrier to entry, and it ended up being more of a millstone around our neck that we could have got on. Because really, when you're building a business like that, you're doing two things at the same time. You're building a manufacturing business and a branding business. Yeah, you're putting them together. And we did that in soup, and it worked. New Covent Garden, and it worked. But it's a lot of effort to try and build both at the same time. And if you can get away from that, and then Little Dish was all outsourced in terms of manufacturing. We found excellent manufacturing partners who could do that for us. So maybe that was something I could have and should have done in the States. But listen, you'll spend all your time sitting here, could have, should have, would have, and you better just move on, really.
Yeah, but I think it's a really, I'm really grateful you brought up the story, because a lot of our audience, they're suffering right now, and some businesses have failed. And to your point, it's a lot of it is out of people's control. COVID has affected businesses in all sorts of ways. Some good, but mostly bad. And so I think your story is quite important right now for people, because I think a lot of people think, how did you get back up? When you had that failure, and like you say, I've been there too. You have that reflection, like, was my last business a success? Was that all luck, or have I got an ability? And you have that doubt. But how did you get back up? Did you just get back on the horse and not think about it, or did you have an idea that grasped you, or how did it happen?
I mean, emotionally, I got back up. Emotionally, I put it behind me and decided to move on. But it took quite a while. I mean, I didn't have a new idea. You can't force new ideas to kind of, come out of nowhere. So I was, like I said, I was moving back from the States. In fact, I think that was a good distraction because I moved from the States back, having spent 4.5, 5 years in California, to Germany, Munich. My wife is German, and we moved back to Germany. I've been living here ever since 2003. So it's quite a while ago. So home is here now. So that was a big culture shock and change and language and all the rest. But so it was a distraction. And I in hindsight, of course, again, I found that was a good distraction. But it took me a good 2 years to figure out what exactly I wanted to do next. I was very clear in my own mind I was going to set another business. Frankly, on one level, what else do I know? I mean, I came straight out of university, did Covent Garden, went to the States. All I know really is this sort of thing. But I've never worked for anybody apart from shareholders. So, all of that is really important to recognize that they're my. So I had to find a new idea. I had to find a new entity, and that took me a good 2 years. And don't forget, I was living in Munich, so and I couldn't speak German at the time, so I wasn't going to set up a business straight away in Germany. So looking at what was happening, there's a lot of entrepreneurship, a lot of startups, a lot of new business ideas in the UK and Ireland. We kind of lead entrepreneurship in the food and drink space, European perspective anyway. And it was right about the time when Jamie Oliver, if you think back to 2006 or so, Jamie Oliver was making his first crusade into feeding the nation and improving the health of the nation, in particular, improving the quality of meals for school-going kids. So you'd have people sitting in pubs having a chat. They didn't have any kids themselves, talking about kids and dinners and food, which was unheard of. So it was a very topical issue. And at the same time, I was figuring out, I wonder, is there an opportunity to develop a range of products that are specifically designed for kids? And what does that mean? What age kids? Babies, no, but toddlers, maybe. Older school. And I met my business partner, Hillary, who was having the same conversation with herself about there's an opportunity here. And we got together. And of course, being in a co-founder situation is always better because you reinforce your views and your attitudes, and you can challenge and you can check back and forth. You can make sure that you're helping each other. So it's a great way to bounce ideas off each other. And that's how it came about. So Little Dish was born out of, it's the right place at the right time. There's a need. We were always questioning how big the need is, like back to my third point, how scalable is it? We were told by lots of people that kids will just eat adult food. Why do they have to have specially designed food? But the insight we had to the consumer base was that no, we'd love some properly designed, healthy, low sugar, low salt, proper provenance, no additives, fresh. All those sort of things are really important back then, and that really are still important now. So that's what happened. I mean, many more things besides, but that was the essence of Little Dish and how it came about, and why I really wanted to do something new, and why we decided on that particular product area.
That's amazing, really. Did you was the investment side an easy transition for you? What was your first investment, and how did it play out? How did you get into that space?
Yeah, sort of in a way, you might say it's kind of, poacher turned gamekeeper, isn't it, really? I'm going from one side of the table, the entrepreneur side, to the other side, the investor side. But I've always taken a very practical view. And I don't hear certain people think, taking on investors, particularly taking on private equity, that's very, dangerous. They just want to take control of your business. Well, actually, they don't. They don't want control of your business. They want a few checks and balances because they're giving you, loads of money. Wouldn't you want control to a certain extent? But they don't want to run your business because they got no idea. In fact, that's why they need you to run the business. So we have private equity and venture capital at Covent Garden and in the States and at Little Dish as well. So I was kind of familiar with that whole thing. And I always kind of thought that, well, one of the things you need to do if you're bringing shareholders on board is try to align everybody's interests as much as you possibly can. There are always going to be decisions at some point down the line, typically at exit, actually, but at some point down the line where you kind of, you've got different interests. But frankly, part of your role, as part of your job as an entrepreneur, I think, is to bring all these interests together and have everybody motivated to achieve more or less the same thing. So if you approach it like that, then it's a lot more, it's a lot easier to manage. And so it was a natural stepping stone for me, really, in terms of moving into becoming an investor. But the other thing Simon's mentioned is that I'm not just an investor that says, here's my cash, call me up whenever there's a dividend to pay or whenever you're exiting. I want to add value. So I like to invest in businesses where I think I can contribute something. So I typically take a seat on the board, not always, but typically take a seat on the board and contribute as a non-executive through that in some sort of value-added way. And that's one of the reasons why I've always continued to invest in the food and drink space, because the area I know best, not just the area, but in terms of setting up, building brands and selling them through retail or through direct to consumer is something I've done myself. So I feel like I have something to contribute. And so, maybe investing is just like a further step after becoming an advisor or a mentor. And, actually it's not a huge step to becoming an investor as well. And I think, to answer your other question, the first one I can't remember now, was Nicks and Kicks, maybe about 3 years ago. I'm hopeless on dates. Probably maybe 4 years ago, something like that. Nicks and Kicks followed by Capsicana, and the more recent one in St. Grain was just this year during lockdown, believe it or not. But the great thing about it is new ideas and new entrepreneurs and new ways of doing things are coming over the hill all the time, and I'm hugely motivated, inspired by that. Like I said earlier, I don't know all the answers. In fact, I love to learn, and I love to learn from you guys with new ways of doing things. So that's the essence of entrepreneur. It's not putting soup in a can. And actually, it's probably not putting soup in a carton anymore now, because that's already 30 years old, So it's great to be part of that sort of ecosystem where I can contribute but also learn and play different roles. And being an investor is just one of those roles, frankly, Simon.
Totally. Well, we have Lesley waiting for us in the waiting room. Our next entrepreneurial guest will be joining us in just a moment. Lesley, thank you for your patience. I've got quite a lot of questions coming in for you. I wonder if John would just try to answer a few of them before we bring Lesley in.
Sure.
A lot of people are asking about they need a mentor, and a lot of people want a mentor. And you mentioned in your bio that you do mentor. How does it work for you mentoring? And if people want to get mentored, do you have any recommendations of how they get that?
Let me answer that last bit first, because I found that interesting. When I was asked it for the first time, and I thought, crikey, I don't know. Let me think. And I have thought about it since then. And the first thing to say is I never had a mentor, and I years later regretted it, because I kind of thought, why did I take it all upon myself? That I somehow figured out that I somehow thought that I needed to figure out everything myself. I was the entrepreneur. Okay, Andrew and myself were the entrepreneurs. We were the ones setting up the business, so we needed to have all the answers. Well, that's pretty silly, really, because starting off, we had none of the answers. We went about answering some of the questions, all right, but it would be an awful lot easier to ask somebody some help. Of course, then you need to take the advice, right? So it's all right listening to advice, but you need to actually act on the advice as well. And I'm not sure back then if I would have even done that. But I think not getting a mentor on board was a mistake, and I would urge people to do that. I'm not saying surround yourself by 10 mentors, 5 mentors. I mean, you probably need one, right, to start with. And I think there's a difference between a mentor and an advisor. An advisor tends to advise the business, while a mentor tends to help the entrepreneur. And I know there's a subtle difference, but I've figured this out by trying to do both at times. And there is a subtle difference, but actually it's quite an important one. And sometimes in the relationship, you can start off being the advisor to the business, and then you realize actually the entrepreneur needs some mentoring here. You kind of shuffle out and pull around and readjust and spend some time mentoring. And then later you might, when the business kicks off again, it needs a different resource. You might become an advisor again. So I have a very fluid approach to it, as you can tell. It's like a very it depends what the role is and who needs it and what the gaps are, what stage they are at in their journey. And I kind of mentor some of the entrepreneurs in the businesses that I advise, or even some of the businesses that I invest in. So I think it's quite a fluid thing. But in any event, I think it's a really good idea having a mentor.
I think it's a really good idea too.
And the last thing I'd say, Sam, very quickly, is get a mentor. No, sorry, but this bit is important actually. Get a mentor who's been there before. So ideally, get a mentor who's been an entrepreneur. So because they get it, they speak your language. They know frankly, they know the shit you're going through, right? Because you go through a lot of that, and they know the pressures, and they know that they've been there. Different business, different time, all the rest of it. But a lot of it is dealing with pressures you never felt you were anyway qualified to deal with, and you're thinking, how did I ever get here? And if somebody set up their own business and being an entrepreneur themselves, that's a great benefit. They can definitely leverage that and lean on that.
Yeah. I mean, I normally on these podcasts I have to talk a lot, but not today. I just let you talk because you're basically saying all the things that I know are true. I mean, I would add as well to your point for listeners that I think you should get a mentor, ideally someone that you wouldn't mind having their life. Sometimes I see people mentoring that and in life that people wouldn't want. And so is that someone you respect, and is that the lifestyle you'd like to end up with? If you follow their advice, it's likely you will end up with whatever their lifestyle is. So make sure that's what you want. And so, yeah, I think mentoring as well. A lot of people do just throw emails around, like on LinkedIn, like, please be my mentor, without any sort of context. And mentorship is a big deal for you, John, as a mentor. You give your time to someone, it becomes very personal. I become friends with the people I mentor. So I always tell people, date first, ask a few questions of that particular mentor. And just have a chat. If you straight in with like, let's get married and have babies, it's not easy for people to just say yes to mentoring people. It's a big commitment. So just take your time and get to know each other and see it as like a friendship or like a relationship, because that's what it's like, right? Mentoring someone.
That's a great build, Simon. That's so true. It's so true. I mean, I think number one, you have to figure out what it is you want, and I know at times it's difficult to know what you want. You don't really know what you want. You just want everything, or you want help, or you want. So tell me what I should need is often a very obvious question, which is kind of difficult to answer. But then you get into it, right? Yeah. But it's kind of like, okay, so what do I need, and can you add it? Can you give it? Yeah. So I need to feel two things. I need to feel I can add value, because there's not much point in doing it if I can't. And I need to feel I have the time to do it properly, to do it justice. That's and right. If I feel those two things are in place, then we'll see what the chemistry is like and see what everything else that you just described is like. But you do need to have a few conversations. And in these days of lockdown or whatever, it's tricky it's easier to build a relationship face to face more quickly. You can clearly have sessions online, and I spent the whole year doing it. But to get to know that person as you described, it's maybe easier to do that face to face. But we'll find ways around that too, and technology helps. So. Sure.
Totally. Well, there's loads more questions coming in for you, but I feel bad. Lesley's waiting for us, so let's bring her in and see how she is. Hey there, Lesley. How you doing? Oh, we're doing that typical Zoom thing. You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed listening in from the wings, and that quote, "Success is a lousy teacher," is going to stay with me. So I enjoyed that.
Okay, good. I'm glad it made sense, Lesley.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here, Lesley, and I'd like it if you don't mind just starting off by telling the audience a little bit about. I love your company name, Over the Bloody Moon. I want to say it with attitude. What you and your business is all about.
Absolutely. So we are a community and organisation that helps women, their family and colleagues through perimenopause. Do you know what perimenopause is?
I had to go on mute because my dog's barking. So I'm going to say no and then hand over to John. Oh, that's so typically you, Simon. Drop me in it. Well, okay, listen, I feel completely unqualified to comment on this, especially with an expert on the panel. But I think it's having the menopause much earlier than you would otherwise have it. Is that right?
It's not correct, but you're not alone, because around 55% of women don't know the term. So it's the stage before menopause, where women tend to get the majority of symptoms, and it can last for around 7 years. So a lot of what we do at Over the Bloody Moon is around education and advocacy, because women aren't aware of joining the dots, I suppose, between what's going on in their life and hormones.
So what does the business actually, how does it work? What's the business model?
So we have a B2C and a B2B model. The B2C is, so basically we've identified different customers, and they have different needs. So for women that aren't very aware or are starting to notice that they have symptoms, we run masterclasses with experts who across all different aspects of physical, mental, cognitive and emotional health. And those are 1 hour Zoom sessions. And then it's also really confusing for women to work out how to thrive at this time of life. There is a lot of information online, but it's confusing. It's a lot of it isn't evidence-based, which means it hasn't been proven in terms of the tools. So another aspect of what we do is a self-care hub called The House. And The House is themed rooms and allows women to go and learn and pick up information around all aspects like nutrition, movement, alternative functional medicine, and so they can go into those rooms and watch films, download resources, and find ways to help themselves. So masterclasses, self-care platform, and then we do corporate work as well. A lot of those people sitting in the audiences aren't aware also about perimenopause, so we help cultivate a conversation and break down the taboo in the workplace, which is really important, so women get the support that they need at this time.
I guess it's interesting to understand, how did you end up doing this, Lesley? What's the story?
Yeah, so well, my story is a tale of being lost and found, and it starts a couple of years ago, probably this time 2 years ago, when I came off the pill. I wanted to kind of see where I was, and what I didn't realize was that the result of that would bring me straight into perimenopause. What subsequently followed was me feeling not myself, starting to feel quite anxious, not sleeping well, getting these weird flushes in the day and also at the night. And it really took me around 6 months to work out what was going on, and a lot of appointments with the doctor, who at the time suggested that I go on antidepressants, and I just felt that was the wrong decision. So I went away. My background is market research and innovation, so I'm a research geek, and I love to kind of go and find out about information and data. And what I found was, as I said, it was kind of really muddy, and very, very time consuming. And I thought, if I'm trained in skills at understanding how to get information and validate it must be very difficult for other women. So that was the beginning of the story of realizing that perhaps I wasn't alone. So I started to reach out on forums and talk to other women that were going through what I was going through, not just in the UK, but around the world. So I realized that this was kind of, a global issue, that many women are unsupported in by their healthcare professionals. Partly that's, women not wanting to go and talk to doctors. So actually around 40% of women never go and see a doctor. They just use online resources instead. So I identified that there was kind of this issue, and then what kind of followed was a journey really of understanding how big a problem it was, how I could help, and of course my background isn't medical, so it was very important. Listening to you talking about mentors and advisors, it was very important for me quickly on to build something I've inherited actually from one of my executive coach advisors, the board you can't afford. And it means that those people are so precious and valuable. If I asked for their daily rate, there's no way that I would be able to work with them, but they are women who are across lots of different health disciplines that bring education and understanding about what women need. And I also have a range of different advisors on a personal level that kind of coach me. So that's been really helpful. And just to kind of sum up in terms of, I registered over the bloody moon a year ago. And if I was to chunk down how I've spent my time, the first 3 months was really looking at the market landscape, talking to users, understanding what the problem was, before even starting to think about what the solution would be. And I think that's really difficult. It was difficult for me because I like to jump straight in. So I really had to kind of take a step back. Then I needed to educate myself in this area of menopause, which I obviously had personal experience, but I didn't understand all of the complexities. So the next 3 months was doing like a dissertation, and I spoke to, well, I stopped counting at around 60 different clinicians, but I tried to speak to a variety of different women's wellness practitioners and understand all of the different aspects that women are facing that I got from my user research. And from that, I transcripted all my stakeholder interviews, liaised with my resident advisors, my board, and pulled together, started to pilot some programs. Actually, the pilot began just before lockdown. So I was meeting with women, testing out early content. And the plan was to create a model that was going to be community-based and face-to-face, almost chapters around the UK. So I had to quickly pivot and think about moving online. And so consequently from that, I moved on to a Zoom format, and that's where the Take Charge of Change program was born, a 6-week program that covers the different spectrums of health, and women love it because they're going through the program together. It's a small group, and they're learning and sharing experiences. So it's not just about what's going on in my body, it's about I'm not going mad, I'm not isolated anymore, I'm not feeling lonely. And that's what I've realized is it's interesting with Over the Bloody Moon, because I suppose what I represent is the ordinary woman, someone that is going through perimenopause. And some women are put off by going to see a doctor because they feel the only option for them is medical, is HRT and antidepressants, which they might not want, or at least at the beginning might not have enough information to make that decision. So and there's also something not and of course, there's a very important part to play for HRT, because it does bring women up to a position of strength for those that need it and can take it. But for other women, or even in conjunction with HRT, we want to have tools that empower us, that we have our inner resources. And Over the Bloody Moon facilitates women and gives them a team with our experts, and also a toolkit, a very broad toolkit to dip into and to be experimental. So in many ways, the journey of being an entrepreneur is little bit like that for our members, in that they are experimenting, and embracing change. They're used to that place of change.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, as a guy, I'm suddenly feeling a bit like the Trump White House, like we're 3 guys who are listening to a subject that I don't think we truly understand, but we understand business. So I'm always like, how can we help you with the business side? I think that the subject matter is really fascinating. And I would just say that, well, first of all, you're getting a lot of love on TikTok right now for your brand name. People are loving it, I think, because it sounds so positive about quite a serious subject. And I think sometimes you do need to bring some light-hearted feeling to such an important subject, right? So good on you. I hope you trademark that, because that's quite it's a good brand name.
Yeah.
I think I had a little bit of experience with the menopause cycle with my mother, because my mother kicked me out of home at 15, and we had a big argument, and now I realize in part that she was going through the menopause. And so she was a different person to the mother who had loved me from 0 to 15. So it can affect, frankly, it can affect kids. It can affect, if my wife's going through it and I don't understand it, I think guys should be brought more into the conversation, is part of what I'm saying. Because I think a lot of guys, I can completely understand how women don't want to go to the doctor and talk about it. And guys don't even know how to talk about it with their partners or people in their lives. Like I had no idea with my mother how to talk about it. She didn't know how to talk about it, and we didn't talk for 10 years because of it, and I was homeless for 5 days because of it. It can really affect things.
You're absolutely right, and it's not talked about enough. It is the largest underserved health issue in the 21st century, and it's not niche. So around the world, 1 billion women by 2025 are going to be going through perimenopause or postmenopause, and every year 30 million women globally go through this. And it's not just about, we tend to think about it about the physical symptoms, but as you say, it's kind of, it has this huge impact. And in fact, what I'm seeing, because I'm on the front line with my community, is the impact that COVID and perimenopause is having on mental health. And there is not a day that doesn't go by where I don't have a phone call or distressing, DMs from women where I need to signpost them. So it's a huge issue. And it affects all of us, which is why Over the Bloody Moon, we don't just focus on women. We also do classes for partners and for mums with their teens, because we think it's important for them also to know how to navigate this and understand what a woman is going through.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing what you're doing, and I wish you'd been around 25 years ago when I fell out with my mother, because she definitely needed someone. But I mean, going forward on the business side, I mean, I'm hoping that you tell me that John has food in his food portfolio that could help, or let us know, what struggles you're having, and anything we can do maybe to advise you, or anyone listening can do to help you with the business. Is there anything we can do to support you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really, this first year has been very much about understanding the market, understanding my users, and testing before putting out my products. I do have a team of my advisors and also the health experts. But I do also, something I've learnt is how amazing volunteers are as a resource. So I'm kind of, tapping into that. But I'm constantly asking myself, am I spreading myself too thin? My vision is to be a global destination for perimenopause, or at least succeed in the UK with my services. And currently, if you go onto my website, you can see, all the different things that I am doing. And I also have health coaches that support me with that. But looking back on your careers when you were in the early stages, would you say it is better to focus on one thing first and do that right? Or is it good to dream big if that's what your mission is?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, I think all of the above, right? Really, let me take it in pieces. First of all, you gotta dream big, because if you don't dream big, you never win small. You have to dream big. That doesn't mean to say you have to go all out, all crazy on day one. But I think entrepreneurs can be accused of dreaming a bit too big at times, but I don't think that matters, or I don't actually think it exists, right? So definitely dream big. Then when you're trying to achieve this dream, try to break it up into bite-sized chunks. Actually, one of the things you said in your preamble was that you might be spreading yourself too thin. I mean, you almost certainly are, not knowing anything about you. You almost certainly are, because that's what entrepreneurs do, right? And you seem to be quite an ambitious and successful entrepreneur, so you almost certainly are. And the fact that you even ask yourself the question is another thing. You are. So you are. But that's okay. You will burn yourself out if you carry on doing that. So you have to find a solution to that. And I think it's back to what I was just about to say, which is try to deal with this elephant in bite-sized chunks and break it down and have a plan. And these sounds really obvious, but it's amazing that people don't have a plan, because they get stuck into it. They're so emotionally involved with it. It's a vocation almost, rather than a business at times. And like I said earlier about New Covent Garden, you got a tiger by the tail, or you're just so consumed, because it's like you just see so many needs out there, and the pandemic has come and has kind of accelerated the need. I get it; it's happening in so many different walks of life. But there's only one of you, so you have to figure out, okay, what can I do myself is going to be more productive? So have a plan and break it down into bite-sized chunks. So I focus on delivering pieces of it, and then bring a team around to back you up. So you can only work whatever it is, 18 hours a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't do that 7 days a week, or you will burn out. But I think the point about really is the second piece of your question was, is you do things exclusively, or I wouldn't say it's either exclusively or a big plan or a big dream. Have your big dream, but you'll never implement it if you try to do it all together. And you do need to break it down into bite-sized chunks and do one thing properly at a time. So what is your business plan? What are you trying to achieve this year? 3-year plan, 1-year plan, 12 months, down to a weekly basis. What is you trying to achieve? And really stick to the knitting. It sounds boring when you have a big dream, but you'll never realize the dream otherwise. Even if you have an army of people to help you. And don't forget, when you do have an army of people to help you, the things you have to do double. Actually, you're actually doing less, but you're directing and delegating more. It's like you've got this team on board, and you want to bring a whole bunch of self-starters onto your team. And guess what self-starters do? They self-start, but they go in all sorts of different directions all at the same time. So you need to spend quite a bit of your time providing the direction for these guys to go in the direction you want them to go in, which is where the business is going. And of course, they will help with this and help with strategy and come up with ideas. But you ultimately have to make a whole bunch of decisions. So you want to be doing less of the doing and doing more of the direction. So it never gets easier. It's not like, okay, that's now done. Phew, what a relief. No, it's on to the next thing, which is even bigger. So you have to be, resilient, but you also have to have a team and you have to have a plan. Otherwise, you will go around in circles. And I know from experience, we did this at Soup at times, in Covent Garden as well, the early few years. It was a crazy white knuckle ride. It was fantastic. It was so exciting. But crikey, it was so exhausting. And we could have made life easier for ourselves. So I think, you do need to have a plan. You do need to be able to focus on one thing at a time, get it right, and move on.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I think particularly going into the new year, breaking everything down into kind of quarters at least. That's great. I was interested hearing your story as well about finding your co-founder. How did that happen? I'm really desperate to have a sort of someone alongside me.
In the 3 businesses I was involved in, I set up, I was as a co-founder each time. 3 different people, probably for 3 different reasons. And how did I find them? Wrong place at the wrong time, Lesley. I can't think of any other way to put it. I mean, joking aside, it was a bit of serendipity. There always is. I would highly recommend it. I mean, I was involved as a co-founder for different reasons each time, but it's a great place to be if you're trying. It's a very lonely place to be as an entrepreneur. It's still a very lonely place to be as a co-founder entrepreneur, but at least you got somebody else to bounce your ideas off. And there will be disagreements at times, but they're likely to be in the minority. And so you could definitely break down that loneliness and be able to bounce ideas off. And even either you want to have complementary skills to yourself, so somebody who does things well that you don't do well or like doing or whatever, or you want to have another woman who really understands the market, or you might want to have a man who doesn't understand the market but understands something else. So it's like there is no right or wrong here. But I think really it's a question of complementary skills. But when you get past the skills, and Simon would almost certainly agree with this bit, it's all about the chemistry, because it's like, Simon used the analogy earlier of mentor being like a friendship or being in a relationship. Well, a co-founder is even more of a relationship than anything else. So you do go through some very difficult times, and sometimes can be very stressful. And so you need to be able to, you don't have to be best friends, best buddies with the person, but you do need to get on with them and work with them and be able to get the best out of the team as a result of that. So skills and experiences are so important, but chemistry, I don't think they can make up for chemistry, actually.
I'll add to what John said. I actually married my co-founder in my business Fluid, which is the business I sold to PwC. I actually married my co-founder. So it definitely, we started out working together, and it's such an intense experience building a business together. If you get on, it can lead to marriage. Now, I would say you can also go and find a co-founder. I mean, it doesn't always have to fall in your lap. It's like hiring people, in my mind. If you write down very clearly what you need, like John just explained, is it a man? Is it a woman? Is it someone that maybe knows the medical side or knows the technical side, or what do you feel that you're missing to achieve that big goal? And maybe I always say to people who are looking for a co-founder, maybe look at it initially as hiring someone for a job. but then you get on so well, and they can add so much value to what you're doing that, frankly, giving them 50% of the platform will just make the platform 4 times bigger, right? So it doesn't have to be a big deal. And I always find that if you get on with someone and you like them and you need each other, those are the first 2 steps to like any deal getting done. So if you can get those 2 things in line. That being said, again, I agree with what John said. I think sometimes co-founder can come with its own issues, just like being married. There's something to be said about being single and being able to just jump on a plane and go and do something if you want to do it and not have to debate it. And there is some strength. I know a lot of investors out there only invest in co-founders, two founders. But I personally don't. I think sometimes it could be a strength to just be able to make decisions on your own. But to John's point, you just need people around you that will support you. And I think that can solve it. I also wanted to quickly say to you, Lesley, about the previous point about building up the business and doing too many things at once. It is a real dilemma, but sometimes the way I best explain my thinking on this is like any business is like moving an enormous mountain, and to move an enormous mountain, you have to move one small rock at a time, a Japanese saying, right? So I think, in a way, you've got to have that big, crazy idea in front of you and then figure out what the small rocks are. And often that's daily, weekly, monthly. And what I've always done is I've said, right, if this small rock has to be moved regularly, and it's the same type of rock, I'll learn how to do it, and then I'll hire someone to move the rest of them. So it allows you to move on to the other types of rocks that need moving, that might require different types of engineering. I'm going way too far with this analogy now, but I think you get what I mean, right?
I love that. Yes, yeah. That's brilliant.
Let me build on that. I really like that too, but I'll literally take 10 seconds on this. Is that I'm trying to get into the discipline of lifting the rocks that you hate lifting. Because what happens is you lift the rocks you like lifting, because you like doing it. And you go back and I'm making great progress. But I'm stepping over all these other rocks to get to the ones, that one there, I lift that one, no problem. Deal with the ones more frequently that you don't like to deal with. And funny enough, you'll end up being better at that, and you make better progress. Because there's nothing worse than making progress and then looking behind you and it's littered with all sorts of problems you haven't dealt with.
The one word of warning, I mean, out of all the businesses that I've seen, the mistake I've seen, the biggest problem with an entrepreneur, and we all, like John said, and Lesley, we all end up doing so many things as an entrepreneur. We can't help ourselves. We're filling all the gaps. Now, whether that's cleaning the toilets because the cleaner didn't turn up today. So, okay, we're going to do it, right? Whatever it is. But I think the one mistake I see that you don't want to fall into is, and I saw this yesterday of an entrepreneur, he has 6 businesses. Now, the back-end structure, all the technology is the same, but he has 6 different client profiles, and he's going insane, jumping in and out of those different profiles. So I think, you can do lots of different things within a business. Maybe it's a webinar, maybe, as you said earlier, it's a consultation, it's this, it's that. As long as it's the same client, I think that's the key. And John said it in his talking about his business earlier. It's so true. Look, who is your client? Work towards helping that client. And I think the good thing about your business is it's pretty clear who they are. Whether or not they know they're your client or not, that's probably a different problem. But yeah, I think that's the only time you go insane, if you try to service too many clients at once.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's what I've been working hard on is kind of, honing down what that one, universal need is. And then there might be different ways in which to kind of, serve that depending on people's preferences. But yeah, that's fantastic. I love the rock analogy as well. It's going to stay with me. I've already got lots of things that I'm going to carry away today. Have I got time for another question?
Of course, sure.
One of the things that I am I suppose keeps me awake at night is that this is a new market. It's an emerging market. It's not like, it's very much blue ocean in terms of, in some ways, there's not even the competitors necessarily to kind of copy and then disrupt, because it doesn't really exist in the way that I have it in my mind anyway. But 25% of my potential audience don't even know that they have a problem ahead of them that's just around the corner. And I just wondered, in your businesses, if you had ever encountered that, and whether you've got advice in terms of how you might awaken an unmet need.
Right.
John, do you want to go?
There's a similarity here, which I'll explain just a little bit. And I'm not trying to in any way to claim that the insight into fresh soup is similar to the insight to your audience. But but there's an advantage. It's kind of a two-edged sword, is what I'm saying. There's an advantage to generating a new category or doing something different or meeting the need of a group that's never been met before, in that there's no competition to start with. So, and this was the case with New Covent Garden. There's no competition in fresh soup. So we could kind of do what we wanted. We didn't have to be looking over our shoulder at competition. I mean, it ultimately came when we proved the market sufficiently and people took it seriously. But the first few years was no competition. The other edge to the sword is that there was no category, so people didn't know what we were talking about. You know, people couldn't say, well, we were saying fresh soup all the time, and people weren't getting it. Now, it's a bit weird thinking of that right now because fresh soup is ubiquitous and there's so many different versions of it, and it's been around for a hell of a long time. This is 1987, right? All liquid soup was in a can, like I think I mentioned. So people, if you want liquid soup, they put down the soup aisle. So there was this issue, and I use this word very carefully, of educating the consumer. Normally, you don't educate the consumer; you listen to the consumer. But we had to kind of get this across to them. So I think there's some similarity. Maybe I'm stretching quite a bit here. You have to kind of educate your consumer that they have an issue that they shouldn't feel like they have to put up with. It's not like just life. It's nothing like it. In fact, there's a way to feel quite normal without going through all these symptoms, and therefore that kind of unmet need. And what I'd say to that is, you're so well positioned because you're so authentic. I talk about authenticity quite a bit, but I think it's served up on a plate to you here because you are a living, breathing example of it. You recognized this condition and you've did something about it. So, but you this whole amount of really deep-seated, deep-rooted, authentic storytelling that you can bring through to your consumer group here by just telling your story, yeah. And you know, I remember when we were speaking to audiences about Little Dish. Now listen, I could make a good argument about Little Dish and explain to moms why they should buy Little Dish for their kids. Kids were toddlers, but it was so much more authentic coming from my business partner who was a female and was a mother as well, by the way. But she could stand up and command an audience of other moms in a way that I couldn't, even though what I was physically saying was exactly the same. So you are absolutely the right person to talk about this, not just because you're a female, but because you're of your experience, because you have an authentic relationship with it, and then, you know, I think leverage that storytelling opportunity to speak about it in a really genuine and authentic way, and then allow people to have this aha moment or this kind of, like, you know, realization or revelation that it's not just me. I thought, well, I'm going crazy or imagining. No, and there's loads of other people going through this as well. And look what we've done for them, and you can be part of the community. So I think that's the opportunity you've got here. So turn that kind of, you know, sort of maybe disadvantage into an opportunity, in that this doesn't exist yet and people don't know what it is. And when I speak about it, it's kind of like I got a lot of blank faces. No, this is who you are, and I think you can put that message through to your audience really, really well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, it's interesting as well. I'm thinking about the website because I've been very focused on, because my background is branding, you know, building this brand, and maybe not enough of the individual. Obviously, you know, my members get to see me on my platform and on the workshops that I run. But yeah, that's good food for thought.
Mm-hmm. I also think there's an element around when you're trying to make people aware of a problem they're not aware of. It's kind of, this depends on your brand messaging and your brand communications. But I was just, I'm enjoying TikTok at the moment. I've got a bit of a thing going on in TikTok, and a lot of people on TikTok right now are really enjoying what you're doing, Lesley, and loving what your brand stands for and what you're doing. A few people have even said that they've had the problems you're talking about and want to connect to you. So
yes, please, LinkedIn, Lesley Salem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll connect people to you. But I think what I noticed, there was a person on LinkedIn who was talking about testosterone and how in men, as they get older, testosterone drops, and the symptoms of what that affects. Now, I haven't had those symptoms, but the point I'm trying to make is I still listened and was like, okay, you know, sometimes when you're tired and you don't, you know, you think you're not having enough vitamins, or you've not had enough vitamin D, or maybe you've not had enough exercise, or you've not eaten properly, you know, you look for all the simple things that you think it could be. And I felt that explanation in TikTok was quite good. It wasn't preaching to me. I didn't feel I had the problem he was talking about, but he had millions of views on the video, and I think a lot of people are learning by just consuming. You could do stuff like that. It's not preaching, it's just making people aware. You know, are you feeling these things? Then maybe this is what's happening, and if this is what's happening, then, you know, just comment below, and we'll try to help you figure out whether it is a vitamin D deficiency or whether it's something else, right? So I think there's and you can partner up with people. There's a couple of really good people on you know, influencers that are listened to from a medical perspective. I don't want to say any names right now, but, you know, there are a lot of people out there that are, you know, medically trained people that are able to talk about this subject and have big social media followings, and maybe partnering up with those people could be a good way, because all the time people think there's something wrong with them at some point in the year, right? So they're always listening to these medical shows, Dr. Phil, and they're really popular, right? Because people are busy talking about symptoms. I think I've got that. So if you can be partnering up with people like that, I think that could help with the they're not even aware thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. What I've started to do. Yeah, please.
Just one point on what something that Simon said there really, really resonates with me. I think is really important. Is not that you would, because I think you understand and you've got empathy with your audience, but don't preach. And the one parallel I'll use is, again, going back to Little Dish, is we figured out early on that there was a huge kind of guilt complex associated with giving your kid processed food, is what people thought. I mean, it's a ready meal after all, right? But it's a very good quality ready meal, and it's it's made in a factory, which is kind of like a big kitchen. But there was a guilt complex. Is that, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. I should be making my food for my own kid. I'm a bad mother if I don't do that. Was the attitude. So we recognized that, and we said, okay, that's really important. We could try and bring that through, but you got to be so careful about, because when you start talking about, listen, you really shouldn't feel guilty speaking to the audience, and they go, who's feeling guilty? Who are you to tell me about guilt? And we suddenly lost control of the conversation. It's like, so you don't mention the word guilt at all. So you don't even go close to preaching. So we know what's good for you. We don't even say that. Look, you can cook at home, and what you cook for your kid is probably going to be the best solution. But every so often, if you don't have time, here's something that is a convenient alternative. That's as far as we could go, and that was good enough. People got it. We're trying to say, don't feel guilty. There was suddenly, who are you to tell us to feel guilty or not feel guilty? And it was like, so you got to be really careful. And I imagine, no idea, but I imagine there might be some sort of issues there too, in terms of, here's a solution to something that you never realized you had, kind of thing. You go, well, how do you get to that conversation? Actually,
yeah,
probably important.
You're absolutely right. And that word of kind of guilt just immediately, doesn't it, take you into a negative space? And for many women, even when they do join the dots, we're kind of asking them to face up to things that they might not, you know, it's going to be quite painful. So one of the things that I have introduced for January, particularly as we might be going into tier 3 and a bit Ms, are some fun classes where people are doing experiences in communities, like non-alcoholic cocktails, and through that we talk about the benefits of alcohol and introduce the topic of perimenopause. I think those kind of areas as well, bringing a bit of pleasure and fun, so it's not kind of, you know, all about the dark side, is really important. That's what our name is all about as well.
I think humor goes so far in subjects like this too. You can go viral, I think, with kind of over the bloody moon thing, you know. And I just to throw some crazy ideas out there. I'm sure you've been thinking about this, Lesley, but I'm just your idea gets me thinking. I wouldn't rule out working with people like Google on this, because they know people are searching for this sort of knowledge all the time. And if you are an answer to some of that, they could help you. And they do invest in a lot of businesses. They have a venture arm. I know it sounds crazy, but, you know, reaching out to them and seeing if there's a way to partner up with this. The other side of the coin is, you know, the NHS should be doing what you're doing. The government should be doing. It should be a medical service, right? I say that about what I'm doing. I'm trying to help the unemployed get a job, you know, create one for themselves through self-employment, right? I've often said this actually should be what the government's doing, not creating zombie jobs. But you know, I'm not confident the government will step up for you or for me, but I still contact them every month with a really well-worded, polite letter telling them what we're doing, and, you know, can they take us over and do it, or, you know. And I think you have a similar opportunity. I think, you know, that it should be a government service. You know, it should be a medical, you know, NHS service. What you're talking about, in my view.
Yeah, in fact, I'm working with there's intermediaries. There's 15 around the country called HNs, and they help innovators get into the NHS. There's obviously a lot of regulation involved. So yes, I'm currently talking to a few of those around the country, which means that some of the services will also have, clinical evidence behind, their impact, and hopefully show that there's savings from a health economics point of view as well.
Yeah, that's good. That's a really good idea. I was going to joke with you, as we've got to throw humour in here, that all you need to do now is become an American company, and January 1st, NHS will be wide open for American companies.
Yes, exactly. If you know anyone, Simon, in Google afterwards, I'd love a contact.
Yeah, I know a few people there, but I don't want to promise anything. But I'm happy to.
Okay, no, but it's a great thought. Yeah, fantastic.
Cool. Yeah,
brilliant.
Okay. I could keep talking to both of you forever. John, you could take over my job anytime and be a host of this podcast. So thank you for coming on today. Lesley, love your story. Thank you so much. I was really quite touched by your post on LinkedIn, actually, saying apparently was someone you'd been looking at for a while. So I really appreciate that. And it's lovely to connect with you, and what you're doing, I have so much admiration for, and thank you for doing it.
Oh, well, thank you both. It's been absolutely brilliant just listening, John, to your story, and then being able to have the opportunity to ask my questions. So thank you.
Sure. Well, let's stay in touch. And thank you guys for joining today. Pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for organising it, Simon. It's been great fun.
All right, guys. Yeah, definitely. See you guys. That's it for today, folks. I hope you found today's podcast useful, interesting. I want to thank my guests for joining. You could do me a big favor and go to the links below. Give Lesley and John a quick hello, even if it's a like on their social media or a comment. Of course, I'm sure they'd love your help. If you could think of any way to support what both of them are doing, please buy John's fish pie. That looks absolutely amazing. It's almost 4:30 here in England. I haven't had lunch. So every time he showed that soup and that fish on screen, I wanted to eat it. So I'm sure you will too if you see his products. And please reach out if you do want to start a business and need some help. We're here to help you. We never want anything in return. Equally, if you're feeling lonely in your business right now, then make sure you subscribe to our podcast. Every single day, we're here to try and give you free knowledge, connections to a community, and help in any way you need it. And as I say, we don't need anything in return from you guys. We just hope that you do well, and maybe in the future, pass it forward and be like John and give back and mentor and help, and perhaps be like Lesley and start a business with purpose. So thanks again for joining today, and please have a wonderful afternoon. I'll see you soon.